In the year 2020, we are dealing with what appears to be strange times. The COVID-19 virus is spreading across the world, causing a global pandemic, with its effects ravaging economies, disrupting social interactions, and instilling a sense of worry in millions. But is this really that strange? Well, this is definitely an important historical moment to live through. This is nothing new. Societies have been dealing with pandemics for thousands of years. And today, we'll be looking at how ancient Rome dealt with the Antonine Plague from the years 165 to 180 AD. The plague began to spread through the Roman Empire in the year 165 AD. Occurring during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 great emperors, Rome's population made up nearly a quarter of the world. The disease that led to Rome's pandemic emerges in the east, with the earliest cases appearing during the siege of Seleucia. The accounts of the spread of the virus from actual Romans vary. One theory of the spread of the disease that was popular at the time amongst Romans was that soldiers invading Seleucia were plundering a temple of Apollo. It was there that they found a cracked wall, which a few soldiers decided to break down. Behind the wall there was a small room, and in the middle was an extravagant chest. When the soldiers opened it, a mystical miasma arose, infecting all that were present, which they believed to be a punishment from Apollo. While we know Apollo was not responsible for the disease, it did, however, quickly spread through the army's camps. Upon the army's return home, the disease spread among citizens and was sped up by infected merchants traveling from city to city. Our primary descriptions of the disease come from the famous physician Aelianus Galenus, today remembered as Galen. Galen had first-hand experience of the spread of the outbreak in the year 165. Although he quickly packed up and fled the city of Rome due to political reasons with other physicians, so he claimed, he was, however, an imperial physician and was called to the city of Aquileia, where Aurelius and his brother Verus, the co-emperor, were gathering troops for the Marcomannic Wars. Quickly upon Galen's arrival, the plague spread through Aquileia. The 2 emperors, Galen, and a small troop of soldiers to protect them, traveled back to Rome. Verus, however, never made it to Rome, as he died from the disease along the way. Galen, fearing his own health, claimed that the gods had directly contacted him, telling him that he must leave the city. While Galen was more concerned with his own health than that of Rome, his studies of the disease provided the Romans with the best descriptions of symptoms and potential treatments. Galen reported that the plague was spread through coughing and sneezing. The initial symptoms were a high fever accompanied by painful swelling of the back and throat. As time went on, other symptoms would arise, such as muscle pains and headaches, but around the 12th day, the fever would break. Many people died in this initial stage. For those who survived, the illness got much worse. Despite their temperature lowering, a runny nose and dry cough would emerge, and the patient would eventually begin to cough up blood in their own tissue. The infection at times spread to the infected person's larynx, making it difficult or impossible for them to speak. During this stage in the illness, rashes would emerge across the body and build up pustules. The blood would rush to these locations, turning them into charcoal-colored blisters, and they would eventually have to be peeled off like a scale. Those who had the disease developed putrid breath that could be smelled from quite some distance. While there was no state-sanctioned quarantine, citizens of Rome began saying that certain households smelled of the plague and were left untouched. The disease ran its course in 2 to 3 weeks, with a mortality rate of about 25%. Scientists today think it may have been a variant of measles or smallpox. The Roman historian Dio Cassius estimated that about 2,000 people died a day during the height of the outbreak. In the second wave of the pandemic, Cassius claims that number jumped to about 5,000 deaths a day. Estimates of the total number of deaths vary. Based on some of the numbers reported at the time, it would have led to about a quarter to a third of the Roman population, meaning nearly 60 million people perished over the 15-year plague. As is common with ancient history, debates occur, and many contemporary scholars estimate that the number was about 10% of the population died from the plague. At the time, the Roman military consisted of 28 legions, containing roughly 150,000 men. These soldiers were well trained and well armed, yet nothing could defend them from exposure to the virus. Thousands of soldiers contracted the disease and were forced to leave their posts, many of them spreading it in their home cities. The depletion of soldiers weakened Rome's defenses along its borders, particularly along the German frontiers. To combat the shortage of soldiers, Aurelius, the now lone emperor, sent a message throughout the empire asking for any able-bodied man to join the military to fill in the missing spaces. Thousands of men joined, but these last-minute militias were not defending their posts at par with those whom they replaced. In 167 AD, Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine for the first time in 200 years. Desperately needing soldiers, Aurelius also allowed for gladiators to join the military ranks, which meant less games for the Roman people. Economically, the plague severely hurt Rome. Mass death meant less taxpayers. Entire districts in Egypt and within the Mediterranean were eliminated from the plague. Countless farmers and merchants died, forcing enormous amounts of land to be uncultivated. The lack of food supplies made certain commodities, such as wheat, double in price. The negative economic trends extended beyond agriculture. There was a decreased amount of output of crafts, slowing down local economies, and records show that the brick industry almost collapsed. Land prices plummeted. Domestic and international trade was impacted by the lack of merchants and financiers. A slowed economy in tandem with fewer taxpayers meant it was difficult for Rome to fund their military campaigns and meet their financial obligations. To recover an economy ravaged by the plague, some stimulus efforts were made. Public works projects were funded, long-standing government debts were canceled, some fundraisers were initiated. Aurelius knew that the people's trust in the government was imperative, so he used the imperial treasury to fund mass ceremonies for the dead. Then, in the year 180, after 19 years of being emperor, Marcus Aurelius himself died of an illness that was likely the plague. Shortly after his death, the plague began to slow down for a few years, until another outbreak occurred 9 years later. Plagues have played an important part in Roman history, with another devastating plague hitting Rome in the year 540, the plague of Justinian. But mass-spread disease has affected more than Rome. It is a natural part of existence here on Earth. The effects of the Antonine Plague have some eerily similar traits to that of COVID-19. Citizens panicked, economies were crashed, doctors were confused, Roman festivals and sporting events were canceled, travel plans were delayed or altogether dropped, and the bodies of loved ones were piling up in the streets. With our pandemic being nothing new, we can receive wisdom from the ancient Stoic philosopher king. Marcus Aurelius wrote during the plague, "Continually reflect that all that is happening now happened exactly in the same way before, and reflect that the like will happen again." He also wrote, "For a corruption of the mind is far more a plague than any pestilential distemper or change in the surrounding air we breathe."